Hi, I'm Wyatt, and welcome back to another build episode of my 2002 Jeep Grand Cherokee, also known as CoWj. In this episode, we're going to talk about what has actually been done to the Jeep. I haven't done a build video in nearly 3 years, and so I wanted to go back and give a full update of everything that I have done to the Jeep and what my plans are from here on out, as well as give a 2-year review on the parts that have been on here for the duration of the build. So let's start off with a bit of background information about the Jeep. It is a 2002 Jeep Grand Cherokee, and it is the limited trim package. It is one trim below the Overland, and the only thing it's missing to be an Overland is the high output 4.7 liter V8. It has the standard 4.7 liter V8, which currently has right around 126,000 miles on it. I have put 20,000 miles on it since I've owned it, as I purchased it at 106,000, which in 2 years, that's not actually all that much. The engine is the 4.7 liter PowerTech V8 by Mopar. It is a simple and fairly robust engine that is OBD2 and is a single overhead cam, so it is not a pushrod V8. Things that I have done to it are simply a deep cycle Odyssey Group 65 battery. I threw on a K&N intake only because it allowed me more engine space to remove the factory airbox. And the shield that the K&N comes with, I did not like particularly, as it is hollow in the bottom. And so if you actually splash through a puddle, water can come up through the bottom of the engine bay and go directly into your filter. So I decided to make my own custom one out of 18 gauge sheet metal, and it doubles as a compressor mount for the ARB high performance single air compressor that I use for airing up tires, as well as to run the rear locking differential. Other things in the engine bay are the Switch Pro, which is a modular design that you run all your accessories off of. And so I run my lights, both the front pods and the light bar, the rear reverse lights, as well as the compressor is switched off of it and the locker is switched off of it. And it has 8 possible switches. I use 6 currently, and I could not be happier with the performance. The front bumper is from a company called Flatlands 4x4. And to my knowledge, they do not produce any bumpers themselves in-house. What they do is they've gone through vehicles and created CAD files, and you can buy a design. I think it's about $30 for this bumper, and they will send you the design file in which you can put it onto a plasma table and have it cut out, in which then you can weld the pieces together. I did not weld this together myself. I did not cut it out myself. I bought it from someone that had already done that before I was even requesting this bumper. And I am not extremely happy with it. I'm not going to specify who made it, but I can tell that even the design itself from Flatlands is not extremely good, in that the D-rings are just mounted to a plate. They don't have any structure going into the frame. And the winch mount, there's not very much space to mount a winch. And I have a relatively large one, being it's the Warn Xeon 8S, and it just barely fits in here. It pushes into the grill a little bit, and it pushes almost into the front of the bumper here. As well as when I bought it, it said it was drilled for the Xeon and every other winch, and the holes were completely off. Speaking of the winch, it is a Warn Xeon 8S, and it has the Spydura 100-foot synthetic rope, which is I have terminated with a Factor 55 flat link. And I have yet to use the flat link. However, I have used the winch about 5 or 6 times in owning it, And I've pulled myself out a couple times, I've pulled other people out a couple times, and I've used it around the house to pull up old fence posts, the concrete that you set in the ground. And it has worked flawlessly every time I've used it. It has worked fast, and I've never been able to stall it out, even pulling the Jeep out of 3-foot mud. So the mud was up to about here, and it was able to pull it out without really any issue. It goes through a fair lead that is from Expedition, Colorado. It is a discontinued fair lead. We don't do it anymore. And it used to be purple. It used to be about the same color as the Jeep. Unfortunately, it has faded, but eventually it will fade to just about silver, and I'm fine with that. So now let's move on to the front axle and the front suspension. The front axle is the factory Dana 44, which is the short pinion model, and it is a kind of a custom length. It is 63.5 inches wide, and that is only on the WJs, as well as it uses CV axles, unfortunately. I have not had an issue with it. I've wheeled the Jeep fairly hard, but the front axle is only, it has the factory limited slip in it. I do not have a locker in it as of this point. Eventually, I would like to re-gear the entire Jeep, as well as put an air locker in the front to match up with the rear. And when I do that, I have axle sleeves, as well as C-gusset braces that are sitting in the garage, as well as I have a 1/4-inch diff cover to match the front, or to match the rear. And the front suspension is a Iron Rock Off-Road Critical Path long arm kit, which is a front 3-link style radius arm long arm kit. And I have only really stayed with the control arms from that. The coils, I never put the Iron Rock Off-Road coils on. I switched to a BDS coil, as it was a much stiffer spring and could hold the weight of the bumper and the winch without sagging. And the shocks in the front are Bilstein 5100s, which I am very happy with. On the front they work extremely well. On the rear they didn't, they were too soft, so I have swapped them in the rear for something else. So here's a closer look at the front coil. As well as you can see, I use a JKS quick disconnect, and this model is actually not the one that's designed for the Grand Cherokee. This is one that I bought used for a JK, and it works just as well. The links do not sit perfectly straight up and down due to the mounting position from factory on the WJs, but I have not had any issues with it, and I'm more than okay with how it sits. So the wheels and tires that I went with for this build were the Falcon AT3Ws, and they are mounted on Black Rock Lobo 950 wheels. The specs on the tire are that they are a 235/85/16, and they are absolutely phenomenal. I've had no issues with them. I've only had them on for about 5 months now. In that time, I've probably put 6,000 miles on them, a lot of highway and a lot of off-road. And I have done everything from driving down the highway in a snowstorm, trying to get up and over multiple 11,000-foot passes with 5 to 6 inches of snow and ice on the ground. And they are winter, they're mud and snow rated, so that means, especially here in Colorado, we have what's known as the traction laws, which is on small mountain passes, such as the one I go over, which is Monarch Pass. You have to, there's often a police officer when it's snowing sitting at the bottom, and he stops everyone, makes sure that their tires are either snow tires or mud and snow rated, or they have chains. And you have to have 4-wheel drive to be able to progress up and over these passes when it's snowing. I have been stopped multiple times with these, and he takes one look at them and says, "You can go." And so I've gone up and over these passes without any issues. I've never had to break out the chains that I keep in the back. And they are mounted on a 16/7 wheel. They're a fairly narrow tire. They're about a 32/9-inch tire. And so mounting it on a 7-inch wheel has them fitting absolutely perfectly. They're not being compressed, they're not being stretched. And I can air them down without worrying about blowing a bead off. And so I typically run about 34 psi on the road, depending on conditions, and then off-road, if I'm doing more of an overland style trip, long distances on dirt road, I'll drop down to 22 to 20. And if I'm doing more of a rock crawling trail or an aggressive trail, I will drop it down to 18 to 15, depending on how bad it is. Up on the roof, I have a fully custom roof rack. I built this one myself, just kind of to see if I could, because I wanted to build a flat rack that wasn't $1,000. And the chances of you finding a flat rack, I think Kevin's Off-Road makes one, and that's about it. I've not seen any others. The chances of you finding a flat rack that sits lower than this one, I have not been able to find one in any of my research. This one sits about 5/8 of an inch off of the top of the roof at the lowest point, which means I have as low a vehicle as possible. I can still fit in the average garage, even with the awning. But I mounted it that way, and because the roof of the Jeep is curved, it allowed me to have about 2.5 to 3 inches at the front and the same on the rear, in which on the front I use to mount a light bar. That's where I have mine, and it's almost hidden, but not really. I like it there because I then have the full length of the roof of the rack to put stuff on, like ladders, anything I need to put up there. I can put it up there without fear of hitting any of the light bar, any of the brackets, or anything. The ARB awning is mounted off that, in which this is an ARB 2000 series awning. I went with this one because when I am camping, if I am doing a vehicle camping trip, I will bring the awning room. And so the awning comes out. It is, I think, 2.5 meters, which is about 9 feet off the vehicle. It is about 6 foot in length. And so you get a 6 foot wide, 9 foot long, and 6 foot tall room that is completely waterproof, it's completely windproof, that you can use to, you can set up a full-size air mattress in there if you so please, or if you are out doing photography and you have to edit images, or you're doing videography and you have to edit the video to try and keep up, you can set up a chair in there, you can set up a small table in there and use it as a workspace without fear of, you can do it so you don't have mosquitoes, you can do it so you're not in the rain, you can do it so you're not in the wind. I've camped in the snow with it. It's a little bit cold as it's a very large area, but you run a cold sleeping bag. I think I had a 0-degree bag. I was totally fine. I really do like how it sits and how it looks, as there's a little bit of wind noise that comes off of it, but not nearly enough. There's very little noise that comes off the tires, there's very little noise that comes off anything on the vehicle. So you hear standard road noise, and it's probably about 15% more than that. So it's basically like driving an older SUV down the road. It has very little increase in overall volume going down the road, but yet I can go to any place that I want. If it's in the middle of the summer and I want to go out to the sand dunes or something and say eat some lunch without sitting in the sun, I can pop the awning out. It takes 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, set it up, relax under it, have shade instantly anywhere. As well as if it's raining, I can pop it out, I can relax under it, wait for the rain, I can cook off the rear bumper. I do have a table mounted there, but the awning doesn't do anything for that. As for running the room as a tent, it's nice if you're doing an overland trip, but it is a little bit time consuming to set up. I will probably do a video on that at some point. And so if you have time and you're not rushed, if you're just on a relaxing trip, go for it. It's probably about a 10-minute setup. It's probably about a 15-minute takedown for both the awning and the tent. And the more you do it, the better you get at it, but it takes a little bit, and the first couple times you do it are going to take a fairly long period of time. So let's move on to lighting, because since we're still at the front, I run lights from Extreme LED. and I have an outdated set of pods on the front. They're the 3D Pro series, and they are just a standard 3-inch LED pod. They're relatively good on price. They're about $35, $40 each, and they put out a lot of light. I have these mounted as ditch lights, so they actually go out to the sides of the vehicle, so that if I'm driving on a country road at night or up here in the mountains where I live, I can monitor for animals on the side of the road. That's my main reason. Up top is a Extreme LED X6 combo. It's a 32-inch light bar. It is a combo of amber and white lights. I absolutely love that bar. I put it on here very recently. The pods have been on for 2 years and I've had no water leakage or anything, and I've pressure washed them to try to see if I can get any water in them, and I was not successful. The light bar is just a extremely nicely built product. I have had no issues with it. It puts out an ungodly amount of light, to the point where if it is completely dark and you're in a row of trees or you're passing signs on the highway as if there's no one else around, it's almost too bright. But in the situations where you need it most, if you're out on a recovery at night, it is absolutely phenomenal. I've come into camp and we've used it to project in front of the Jeep to go and chop wood there safely. And the ambers are absolutely fantastic when driving through snow at night, as you can turn those on to get a little bit more light that doesn't pick up the snow as much as the white lights do. And they work the same in dust. However, I have not had a chance to test those yet, as it's been winter. Underneath the Jeep, you can see the factory cross member, which is soon to be replaced, as well as a Rusty's Off-Road transfer case skid plate. And behind the transfer case skid plate is actually hiding a NP242, which is a two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive transfer case that I swapped in instead of the all-wheel drive case that comes in these Grand Cherokees. I did the swap, and I don't recommend doing it yourself. It is a lot of effort and they're very finicky. And so when I was done, I actually took mine to go get rebuilt by a professional shop just to make sure it was in tip-top shape. So I didn't have any issues with it. And you can also just see the long arm kit from Iron Rock Off-Road that mount to a bracket that's right in front of the transmission crossmember. Out back, I have the standard Dana 44 HD, which is an aluminum housing Dana 44 that uses some highly upgraded parts from multiple other vehicles, such as a ring and pinion out of a Dana 60 size differential. It uses the ring gear from the Corvette and Viper rear axle, and it has 30 spline axle shafts in which I have put a ARB air locker to make sure that I always have traction to the two rear tires, and to make sure that the aluminum housing survives, as they are known to bend when you're running 35-inch tires or larger. I'm only running 32s and 33s soon, so I'm not too worried about it, but as a precautionary measure, I threw on a Chassis Unlimited 1/4-inch plate welded diff cover, and underneath the differential, to keep it from being hit by any rocks, I put on a Mountain Vista fabrication skid plate, which bolts to the axle tubes on either side and just near the pinion area in the front. And I have had the entire rear end of the Jeep sitting on that skid plate, and it didn't bend. It did not even contact the center of the axle, and I've had no issues with it other than I need to pull it off and paint it soon. The rear suspension is very close to factory, as all I have in there is coils and shocks, which I will go into more depth in a second. Out back for suspension, I have a BDS 3.5-inch lift coil on a 1.5-inch spacer. This is going to be swapped out soon, but it's all I could get with a high spring rate to get about a 4-inch lift, and I am going to bump up to about a 6-inch lift here soon to run a 33-inch tire, and so I'm going to swap those out quite soon. I've had no issues with them, and it is a very good spring rate for someone that has a full rear bumper and tire carrier, as well as holding a lot of weight in the rear. It didn't sag too much overall, maybe about a ½ inch, so that's why I threw a spacer in there. And to combat the sag and the extra weight and load, I threw on some Fox Performance Series adjustable remote reservoir shocks. These have 10 points of adjustment from, you can make the Jeep ride like it's on a cloud, or you can stiffen it way up to a point that you really don't want to use, and it would only be good if you are fully loaded in the back as well as towing a trailer. Other than that, I have had no issues with these, and I'm absolutely astounded at how well they perform. And I've never had any fade issues. I've never had any big bottoming out issues. They have a built-in bump stop on the upstroke, and they are just an absolutely fantastic upgrade that I did about a year ago to the Jeep, and could not be happier with the results. So out back we have a bumper from a company called Custom 4x4 Fabrication. This is a small company out of Oklahoma, so they have a relatively long lead time in building these. Mine was about 5 weeks from when I ordered it to when it was delivered, and amazingly they did actually deliver it to my house, opposed to the rock hard bumper that I had on before this, which was damaged in an accident where I got rear-ended. And so this bumper is not as it would be shipped to you. I have modified this bumper, and so the tire carrier is offset to the passenger side, which is the side that the hinge is on, and I have added a dual jerry can mount. I would like to go through and refresh this rebuild by putting another hinge on this side for the jerry cans, so that it is the tire is supported by one and the jerry can is supported by the other, as it is a lot of weight to have 10 gallons of gas and a full-size spare. The spare is the old General tire that I had. I purchased 4 Falcons, and I just used this as a worst case scenario. I have standard Trasharoo from Expedition Colorado, and in the bumper I have 2 flush mounted flood pattern pods that are a 3-inch pod, 6 LEDs, that is from Extreme LED. This bumper actually does not have a hitch incorporated in it. I kind of would like to see that, but they use the factory hitch, so you have full confidence in that you don't have to worry about, is this hitch going to be able to tow 5,000 pounds if I need to. And so I've pulled people out with this hitch. I've pulled people out with this bumper multiple times as well. I've had no issues with either one. The only issue I ever had was with this bumper. I put it down to my fault, being that it's still a single carrier, and I actually had one of the bolts on the hinge break. The top sheared off. I was able to pull the bolt out, and I put in a stronger grade of bolt. I put that down to my fault, as I've added a lot of weight to this, and it was not originally designed to hold that much weight. The website, I believe, states you can hold up to a 35-inch tire on the standard mount. So you guys that want to run really big tires, this is a bumper that you can run, and it's a very cool design in that it's modular. This piece here is separate from this side piece. So an issue that I had with the rock hard bumper is it's a single piece design. So it fits some WJs extremely well, and others it doesn't. My Jeep, it was very tight fitting, and it actually hung down about 1 inch from where this bumper sits, so you could see the indentation of the factory bumper. As well as that bumper had an issue of, at about 55 miles an hour on the highway, on a concrete road, the tire would shake back and forth. It's probably due to the wheelbase and the distance between the corrugations on the road, but it would shake back and forth to the point in which the entire Jeep would move. You could feel it move back and forth with the tire. So this one does not have nearly as bad. You can get a very slight shake on a really bad old concrete road where the expansion joints are much more defined, but a modern new concrete road, it's smooth sailing. You can cruise. My Jeep, I can cruise 85 miles an hour on the highway. I get 20 miles per gallon, and I don't have to worry about a thing. It's nice and quiet. Even with the roof rack, which I'll go over soon, I don't have much wind noise. I can have a normal conversation. I can listen to music on a reasonable amount. I can have 4 people in it in relative comfort. If I'm going on a trip, 2 people, I have enough gear to go 2 to 3 weeks without really any issue. And with the jerry cans on it off-road, I have a range of about 350 miles if I get right around 13 mpg off-road, which on dirt roads and such I can get about 15. If I'm doing a hardcore trail or I am going down a really rough dirt road that has a lot of washouts, so it's slowing down, throwing 4 low, crawling up it, and then putting it back in high range, I can get about 10, and so that means I have a range of about 300 miles, and which is more than enough for most of the trips that I do around here. If you are building this to go down to Baja Peninsula, and there might be stretches where you're trying to get 400 miles, I would say invest in either more jerry cans on the roof in the back, or put in a long-range tank. I know there's a company in Australia that makes an aluminum long-range tank that would probably about double your range. But the bumper itself, I've had no issues with. The rock hard bumper, what happened to it is I got rear-ended by a Land Cruiser. It was an 80 series Land Cruiser, and that bumper saved this Jeep. The bumper took all the impact. It bent the tire carrier and the swing-out arm, and I had a high lift jack mounted right about here. That got bent and destroyed in the accident too. However, I've gone through and checked the frame and everything, and it has sustained absolutely no damage. So the bumper took all the brunt and saved the Jeep. If I didn't have a rear bumper on it, the Land Cruiser would have totaled the Jeep. But I ended up totaling the Land Cruiser as the front of the frame got bent, the engine got pushed back 2 inches, and the front axle was also bent in the collision. And this was about a 15 to 20 mile an hour. I was stopped and he rear-ended me. I had to panic stop as a couple cars in front of me, someone got cut off. Everyone slammed on their brakes. I was able to stop due to, I have a set of stage 3 EBC brakes on this, front and rear. It's new pads and rotors. I'd like to put on new calipers just because they're getting old. I'd like to make the braking as good as possible, but with those brakes I was able to stop without hitting the car in front of me, but the Land Cruiser either was not paying attention or ended up not being able to stop in time and hit me. But no harm, no foul. That's the only time I've damaged one of these wheels, the Black Rock wheels. It bent it fairly significantly, but you're getting hit by a 6,000 pound SUV, and the wheel and tire is the first thing it hit. So no bad marks to any company that was in that situation, because if there's any wheel that can take that kind of a beating, someone let me know. But I am more than happy with how it ended after that accident. I'd like to thank everyone for watching this video. I am hopefully going to start doing these a little bit more regularly now, and keep you updated on the Jeep itself. And I'm going to try and start doing little bits of trips that I go on, or just little adventures, a day trip, or go out for a couple nights, or just anything that I find might be interesting for anyone that wants to watch it. Thank you very much. Ask any questions that you need to in the comments, and have a wonderful day.